Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today we shall be marking Yom Yerusalayim, that's Jerusalem Day in English. That actually marks the liberation of Jerusalem during the Six-Day War and the unification of the eternal city that is Jerusalem. Well, welcome to the programme. I have two very special guests with me. I have Roger Waters from A Deeper Look Media, who's produced an excellent documentary on the plight of the Jewish settlers in Judea and Samaria. And of course, not forgetting Zalmi Unsdorfer from Likud UK, one of our viewers' favourite guests on the Middle East Report and a regular. So thank you so much for being here. Roger, you're making your debut on the Middle East Report, and I did try and get you on this programme just before October the 7th. Didn't kind of happen, but you're here now, so I'm pleased you're here. Would you want to share with us your Jewish story? Because you're a Jewish businessman. What was your life like growing up in this country being Jewish?
A very good question. Until the Six-Day War, I grew up in a Jewish family, wasn't particularly Orthodox, and it wasn't particularly Zionist. I didn't really understand or know about Zionism, but when the war broke out, I was working as an accountant, article clerk, and a very close friend of mine was also working in the same office, but he was a Zionist, and he grabbed me by the neck, and he said, "We're going to Israel." I said, "Where are we going to Israel? There's a war going on." He says, "We're going to go, and we're going to go to Israel, we're going to help." I said, "What do they need us for? A couple of Northwest London Jewish boys, we can't do very much." I said, "No, we're going to go and help." So we went down to the Jewish and we signed up. This was about, I think, June the 3rd or 4th, maybe the 5th. Anyway, I thought nothing of it. We just go down, we sign up. I never told anybody. Anyway, the day the war finished, we got a phone call from the Jewish Agency, "You're on the next plane." So I went home, I told my parents, I said, I'm going to Israel. They said, "What are you talking about?" "I've got to go help." I went to my boss and told him I was going, and he said, "Good luck. You can go with pleasure." So the next day, my dad took me to Heathrow, and there was 60 Advim, volunteers, sitting there waiting for the plane, and no sign of my friend Ian. Just no sign of him. So there was like 40 minutes to go before the flight. I phoned his mum, and he answered the phone. I said, "Ian, what are you doing at home? We're leaving in 40 minutes." He said, "My mother wouldn't let me go." So the Zionists stayed at home, and the non-Zionists went to Israel and became a Zionist in the next year and a half that I was, spent in Israel, helping mostly in the kibbutzim, because the soldiers were still, on the front lines and trying to secure the place. And I had an amazing time. I also traveled around and spent time with Arabs in those days, in Jerusalem. I remember actually sleeping in an Arab hotel in the old city, in the Muslim quarter. There was no fear. Luckily I spoke a little bit of Hebrew, and they spoke Hebrew, and we got on pretty well. And there was no friction really, even though they'd obviously lost a war. It didn't seem to matter to them at all. And we had great relationships with the people there. It was a fascinating time, to be honest with you. Nobody would have thought for a minute that we'd be where we are today, 75 years or 70 odd years later.
Yeah, 76 years.
Yeah.
Quite incredible.
Yeah. No.
And Zalmi, it's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. I just want to let our viewers know how you are, how your family is, particularly with this unprecedented rise of Jew hatred that is really affecting the Jewish community right now in this country.
Actually, just this morning, my 20-year-old daughter went for the last time to her university because she's taking time out for a year because the situation is so toxic. There have been a number of incidents in in that university. I don't want to name it, but I put it down to Jew baiting. Yesterday she sent me a letter that she had drafted with a bit of help from her elder brother to the university, saying how she felt about it, saying that in a media class she was forced to watch a Palestinian supporting group show footage of October the 7th in the classroom. And she explained afterwards in her letter that it was deeply hurtful and distressing for her, especially she had been with us in Jerusalem on that morning, and we had gone 5-6 times into the shelter. So she came back today and said, it was my last day today. And she's now going to go on to a different course as an external student because it's just too toxic. Does that answer your question?
It does. It's tragic. Unbelievably tragic. So please send our love and support to your daughter as well. If she's anything like you, then she'll be a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure.
She's got the spirit, yes.
Excellent. And Roger, tell us about how you got involved in Israel Advocacy. I mean, I love your story about how you became a Zionist, but how did you get literally involved with Israel Advocacy? And share with us something about the incredible documentary you made about the plight and the case for the Jewish settlers who are living in the biblical heartland of Israel, which is Judea and Samaria.
It's quite interwoven. I met an amazing man who was part of the Bet Halochem, where they look after the injured soldiers in Israel. And I met this man. He was disabled, quadriplegic, an amazing guy. And we created a great relationship. And from him, I met other Israelis through Bet Halochem, and established myself as a supporter of Israel at that day. But it wasn't anywhere near what it is today, because a few years later I started to get particularly aggravated by the BDS, supporters, the boycott, divestment and sanctions. And so I made it kind of like part of my life's work to try to demonize and delve into that organization and try and show it for what it was, which is, Jew hatred at the end of the day. So I joined I got involved with an organization called Lev Ha'olam, which is the heart of the world. And it basically collects products from the whole of Judea and Samaria, packages them up and ships them to the diaspora. So you subscribe for these packages. You don't know what you're going to get. You pay the same amount every month. You get amazing stuff, from olive oil to biscuits to cosmetics, jewelry. This lovely box turns up. It's very exciting. My daughter gets a box. My son gets a box. Their kids love it. So I met a lot of settlers. I went to the kibbutzim, the moshavim, and I saw them making things. And I then decided that I should enlighten the world to these people, because they were demonized. Nobody knew much about the people. They just called them settlers. I actually don't like the word settlers, because they're not settlers actually. They're resettling the land.
Exactly, and pioneers.
That's right. So I decided to interview them and try to just decide what to do with my interviews. So I went with Oliver. And we traveled all around Judea and Samaria. We interviewed probably 50 or 60 different people, settlers who were manufacturing. And we had a great experience, 2 weeks traveling around, with a guide to take us from place to place. It's all prearranged. We met a lot of Arabs as well. We interviewed Arabs in Judea and Samaria. So they're not Israeli Arabs. They were Arabs who were governed by the PA. It was amazing that none of the Arabs I met, the Muslim Arabs I met, had harbored any ill will towards the people they worked for. They're working in the factories, in the fields for Jewish people. And I think we have to remember that the reason the Arabs came to the land of Judea and Samaria was because the Jews were moving in there in the 19th century. And they realized how prosperous they could be by working with Jews. And I saw that with my own eyes, that these people working for Jews, these Arabs working for Jews, were able to send their kids to school, give them a good life, give them decent clothes to wear. And if asked a question, where would you rather be governed by Abbas from the Palestinian Authority or from Israel, the answer was always Israel.
That's incredible. I think I've visited one of the industrial hubs that employs a lot of Arabs from the Palestinian Authority working for the Jewish pioneers living in the biblical heartland. But Zalmi, as a religious Jewish person, share with us the importance and significance of Judea and Samaria, because having visited the Shomron and the site of Shiloh and being up there, I can say from my own personal experience, it's only second to Jerusalem. And if you haven't visited that region, it's like you really haven't visited or seen Israel at all.
Yes, I mean, my story is very, very, in many ways similar to Roger's. I mean, my Zionism sprang out of going into the territories, into Judea and Samaria, seeing things for myself. And then combined with my visit to Auschwitz to watch the fly past of the IDF, of the Air Force, over the camp in which my father had survived. So it was that kind of epiphany. But certainly I remember a time when I considered Rabbi Moshe Levinger, who was the person who opened up Hebron, as a terrorist. I would see pictures of him in the newspaper with an M16 or whatever it was slung over his thing and a beard and a big kippah. And I actually called him a terrorist at one stage. And in later years, I got to know him very, very well. And he's one of my most revered personalities in Israel. He's not alive any longer, but I did spend a lot of time with him in Hebron. So I think even I was the subject of I believed some of this demonization that went on. But the heartland of Israel, where every literal every turning is a piece of the Bible. You know it's ours. You don't have to prove to anyone it's ours. As they say, that the answer lies in the soil. Every week another archaeological discovery comes and completely debunks this whole idea of Palestinian statehood, which goes back to 1967 when it was invented, or a couple of years beforehand.
Yeah.
Excellent. And Roger, just share with us this new documentary. It's almost like a cartoon that tells the history of Israel and also the Palestinian Arabs. And just explain your reasoning behind it and why you thought it was needed to put the record straight when it comes to the history of the modern state of Israel and its establishment.
Well, it all came about, as for my grandchildren, who know that I'm involved with Israel, asked me a simple question, what's going on? They didn't understand it. They were only young, sort of 10 years old, 12 years old. They really heard a bit about it. I don't know whether it came from school or the news. And they just asked me to explain what happened. And it was quite difficult to explain to them and keep their attention. So I decided the best way to do it was through this animated video, which would hold their attention for more than 2 minutes, which it has done, and explains the conflict in simple terms, and in my terms how, because I remember still having friendship with Arabs in 1967, but going back to 1916, before the Mufti of Jerusalem, the Grand Mufti, who by the way was appointed by the British, so they've got a hand in this problem. So, we decided to work, Oliver and I, to animate it and to bring it to the attention so kids would understand it. But actually, a lot of adults, helps a lot of adults as well, to be frank.
Excellent. So let's go and see the first 5 minutes of this excellent production called Once Upon a Time in Palestine, Israel and Palestine Explained.
The year is 1916. Let's meet two children, Ahmed and David. They're arguing, as friends do, over a game of marbles. They are good friends. The place they live is called Palestine. David is a Jewish boy and Ahmed is a Muslim boy. In 1916, they were both 10 and cheeky kids.
Hey, give me my blue one back. Hi everyone, we're in Palestine, but this land we're in has had many names. Canaan, Judea, Israel, the Holy Land to Christians, the Promised Land to Jews. The capital Jerusalem is significant to the three Abrahamic religions. Judaism, 3000 BC, Christianity, 40 AD, and Islam, 600 AD.
Yes, that's right. And the people who rule the land in my time are called the Ottomans, ruling Palestine and many other places in the region for 400 years, 1517 to 1917. This Turkish Empire governed different religions.
My family have been living in this land for over 3,000 years. It was first named Judea after the Jewish tribe of Judah, although the earliest known name of this region is Canaan.
But then Judea was changed to the name Syria Palestina by the Romans in 67 AD after they invaded and expelled almost all the Jews. From this point, Jews were scattered around the world.
I have some family who stayed in the region throughout the years, but most of my family went to other countries. The Jewish people, my people, have always longed to return to the land of Israel, where they can live in peace.
And my family have lived in the same land for 1,300 years. They migrated here from other regions of Arabia.
It is 1918 and David and Ahmed are now 12.
Germany and its allies, including the Ottomans, fought against France, Britain and their allies. When the Germans lost the war, the Ottomans lost their empire.
Our fates are now with the British, who have appointed the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, to control us.
In 1920, the League of Nations was created to promote peace in the world. They agreed that the Jews, who were suffering persecution, be allowed to return to their homeland. They suggested the whole of Palestine, including what later became Jordan, be allocated to the Jews.
At the same time, the Mufti was very angry about this, despite the fact that the League also created many other states that would become independent Arab countries, such as Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. But the Mufti believed that the Arabs had the total right to Palestine, from the river to the sea. And so he called for attacks on the small Jewish communities who had legally purchased land from Arab and Turkish landowners.
This is bad news for me and Ahmed. The Mufti at first befriended the British but soon changed his allegiance once the Nazis established themselves as anti-Semites in Germany.
There were Arab attacks on Jews and reprisals, and this was to be the beginning of the conflict.
David and Ahmed are still playing marble games, but while their friendship is strong, politics and hatred is causing a rift between their respective peoples.
We will find it much more difficult to continue our friendship now. The majority of my people still want to be friendly neighbours with yours, but your elders are too hateful of us.
20 years on. From 1929 until the beginning of the Second World War in 1939, the Grand Mufti encouraged Arabs in Palestine to attack the British and drive them out, and to attack the Jews because they denied the Jews their right to return to their ancestral homeland. In World War II, the Grand Mufti supported the Nazis and met with their leader, Adolf Hitler, who supported their plan to exterminate Jews.
Certainly not a time for a friendly marbles game with Jews and Arabs, who have now officially become enemies. Although the more moderate Muslim families always coexisted with the Jews, this was becoming more difficult in an area that was being hit by land and religious conflict.
6 to 10 years on.
In the Second World War, 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust. So hundreds of thousands of surviving Jews had nowhere to go but their ancestral homeland. It was a land still controlled by the British, with a population of Jews, Arabs, Christians, and other faiths. Many Jews who had returned over the past century had legally purchased land, and the majority of Jews wanted friendly relations with the Arabs. And Jerusalem had once again become majority Jewish by the late 1800s.
To appease the Arabs, the British controlled the number of Jews allowed to enter Palestine. The British struggled to keep the peace between Arabs and Jews.
There were huge problems. The Arabs were under instructions to attack the British and the Jews. The Jews had been allied with the British until they had to fight for the right of their fellow Jews to be let into the Holy Land. In 1947, the British handed over the mandate to the newly formed United Nations. The United Nations democratically brought Israel into existence with the partition plan, allocating land to the Arabs and the Jews equally.
So in 1948, Israel declared itself a Jewish state, while the UN proposed dividing the land into 2 states. Arabs and Jews were expected to be allowed to live in each state. At last, a state where me and Ahmed can play shesh-pesh together.
But unfortunately, the Arabs did not accept the partition and attacked Israel almost immediately in the War of Independence. The war set in motion the Palestinian refugees crisis, said to number 750,000. For the Arab people, this is referred to as their catastrophe.
Unfortunately, the Arabs living in Palestine were told to leave by the Arab forces against Israel. Those Arabs that ignored the warning and didn't leave were not dispossessed by Israel and have had equal rights as Israeli citizens.
And that was excellent. If you want to see the second part of that, I suggest you go onto YouTube and look at Deeper Look Media. Sorry, I had to look at my notes there. So Deeper Look Media on YouTube, and you'll see that whole film in its entirety. So very good to educate children about the current conflict. Zalmi, what did you think of Roger's work there and the historical and, well, putting everything in its context, really, when it comes to the history of the modern state of Israel?
I think it's amazing work to bring it down to a cartoon setting, because so many of the youngsters of today are so totally hooked on TikTok, and all it's. Do you know something? The problem that we have as Jews is we have no bandwidth. Our enemies have got 99% of the bandwidth. So whatever propaganda, bad news, fake news they want to put out is everywhere. And it doesn't matter how much we talk about hasbara, which is explaining our side of the coin, we're always going to be too little, too late, and certainly only using 1% of the bandwidth. I don't think we'll ever really overcome that, no matter how much money we throw at it. And we are left, in the words of the prophecy, as a nation that dwells alone and shall not be counted among the nations of the world, which is, anyone looking up the book of Numbers, I think it's 25 or something like that, chapter 25, we'll see that prophecy literally there. It is, we're living in times of prophecy. The Jews had returned to the land, which was prophesied. We have planted in the land, made it bloom, and we have, brought back enormous amounts of Torah study and Jewish education since the Six-Day War. We've done all these things. These are all prophecy. And then we are now going through the epoch of not being counted amongst the nations, which is almost undeniable right now. We're seeing it in living 3D Technicolor.
Absolutely, but you have a lot of Christian Zionists who love and support Israel, support the Jewish people, including this program here, where we are doing everything we can to really tell the righteousness of Israel.
Amazingly so, yes.
Roger, very impressive work. Did like the cartoon. It's very engaging, very, very well done. I think it tells the history of the two peoples very, very well. But everything now is seen through the prism of October the 7th. So can you share with us where you were on October the 7th, and when did you first become aware of the horrors that were taking place in Israel, the biggest mass terrorist attack in Israel's history, and of course the biggest massacre against the Jewish people in one single day since we've seen in the Holocaust, and that was over 80 years ago?
Well, I mean, obviously it was quite early in the day. In England, I think it was around about 6:30, 7. My wife wakes up quite early. First thing she does is turn on I-24, and she says to me, "Hey, wake up! There's serious trouble going on in Israel. There's just some kind of invasion." So obviously I woke up, and the two of us sat there, I think glued to it the whole day. We just couldn't believe what we were seeing, and it was just mind-boggling, really. You just couldn't take it in, especially what was going on at the Nova Music Festival. The massacre of innocent people, and it was kind of like very similar to the feeling I had on 9/11. When the Twin Towers exploded. Again, it was a shock, a complete shock. So, and we're still this one now is going to last. I think it's going to last me my whole life. Actually, I can't see it ever getting over the images, that I have seen. I've tried not to see some images, but it's. I don't think I'll ever get over the fact that Jewish women and men have been raped and murdered, and children, physically abused and murdered as well. So, I don't know, it's a terrible thing to come across, at this time of our life. I suppose we've been quite lucky, we've had a good number of years of Jewish, expansion, of technological wonders created in Israel that they've shared with the world. I mean, if they want to boycott Israel, as we all know, they're going to have to stop using their mobile phones and everything else that has a part that's made in Israel.
Most of our hospitals were closed down as well, so yes. Absolutely. And Zalmi, we know your story, and just very briefly, you were in Jerusalem on October the 7th, so you felt that personally as well with the rockets and missiles. But share with us now, I mean, we are 7 months on, or nearly 8 months on from that horrid day of October the 7th. The IDF are engaged in a military war in Gaza against Hamas, particularly with the international community doing everything they can to pressure Israel not to carry out their offensive into Rafah, which is the border crossing between Israel and Egypt in Gaza. But share with us how we're seeing out of this conflict an increasing pressure on Israel and moves by the international community to push forward the creation of a Palestinian state outside of a negotiated settlement, which is the Oslo Accords, and how dangerous this is.
Well, first of all, it's rewarding terror on a huge scale. Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't have given Hamas and Iran a greater prize than that. But they don't want a Palestinian state. They want a state in place of Israel. They've refused any peace terms for a Palestinian state, I think 8 times. Barrett offered 3/4 of Jerusalem and 97% of Judea and Samaria to Arafat, and it was refused.
Why didn't they have a state in 1967 between 1948 and 1967 when it was occupied by Jordan? If they wanted a state, that was the time to do it, wasn't it?
Because the Jordanians wanted it. Yeah. And it was under Jordanian jurisdiction, and Jordanians weren't going to give up on that. And that's why I think the Jordanians got frozen out. But it is a very good question. I mean, this was the time, also Egypt as well, when the Egyptians were in control of Gaza. No one wanted Gaza. No, even Arafat didn't want Gaza.
But it's not about, that's the biggest error. It's not a territorial war.
Exactly.
This is a religious war of Islam, fundamentalist Islam, against the Jews, with the doctrine of wiping out the Jews. One bomb nation. Yeah. That's what Ahmadinejad, was one of his guys, called it.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at this a very recent CBN News report that looks at the growing pressure being placed on Israel by the international community, and also many European countries are seeking to create a Palestinian state outside of a negotiated settlement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority.
As the White House investigates whether an Israeli strike that the Gaza Ministry of Health says resulted in the death of dozens of civilians violated a red line, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended Israel's actions while admitting a tragic mishap took place.
In Rafah, we've already evacuated about 1 million non-involved residents. And despite our best efforts not to harm the non-involved, unfortunately, a technical failure happened last night. We're investigating the case. We will present the conclusions because this is our policy.
The IDF released this graphic showing the strike took place outside the humanitarian zone set up to take Gazans out of harm's way. They took several steps to reduce the risk to uninvolved civilians and use precision munitions. This video posted online purports to show that a Hamas jeep loaded with ammunition and weapons contributed to the destruction with secondary explosions. The strike targeted 2 senior Hamas terrorists who directed terror attacks in Judea and Samaria.
According to initial reports, a fire broke out after the attack. These terrorists were hiding underground.
Monday, former U.S. presidential candidate Nikki Haley toured the sites of the October 7th massacre, including the Nova Music Festival. Haley told reporters Israel is fighting the same enemies as America, and blasted Ireland, Norway, and Spain for recognizing a Palestinian state.
For all those countries who decided to recognize a Palestinian state, do you know what that felt like here in Israel? You just gave credit to Hamas and all that they did. For all those looking at the ICC and ICJ, right before we landed, there were strikes in Tel Aviv. Why? Because the ICC and ICJ just emboldened Hamas.
A Hamas leader says the group is also encouraged by protests on U.S. college campuses. Khaled Mashal said the protesters will help defeat the Jewish state.
We thank the great student flood which emerged from the American, European, and Western universities and has reached all the countries of our nation. We are grateful for the spirit that we have witnessed in our nation and in humanity as a whole. We have the opportunity to defeat Israel, Allah willing. We have an opportunity to dismantle the Zionist enterprise.
Meanwhile, Egypt and Israel are investigating an exchange of fire between their forces near Rafah that left one Egyptian soldier dead. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Good to see there the Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley visiting the sites of the horrors that took place on October the 7th, but also speaking up against the ICC and also those European states who want to implement a Palestinian state, speaking truth, and a great report there by our friends at CBN. Zalmi, I mean, this should be a time of celebration, remembering the incredible victory that Israel achieved during the Six-Day War in 1967 and the unification of the Eternal City of Jerusalem back in Israeli sovereignty, back in Jewish hands. Just share with us the importance of this what's a Jewish festival known as Yom Yerusalayim, or Jerusalem Day.
Well, it's particularly important now, after October 7th, because we are grieving, we are hurting, not just the people in Israel who've had the most heinous, tragic Holocaust committed, literally in their heartland, but here in the diaspora, as I've spoken, about, my daughter, and there's hundreds of stories like this, and we see these toxic, rabid marches down our streets, river to the sea and so forth, and we see the vice president of Spain talking about river to the sea. These are very hurtful times for us, and we are looking for the hand of God in this, because we saw the hand of God in 1967. 3 weeks before the conquest of Jerusalem, the reunification of Jerusalem in 1967, which we never set out to do. It was an accident, or accidents is, God trying to appear anonymous. That's what an accident is. But 3 weeks before was Independence Day, and people in Israel were celebrating Independence Day with a parade in Jerusalem. And the Jordanians, who controlled everything after the David Citadel Hotel where it stands now, which is Mamilla, they had a border there, and everything beyond there was Jordanian flags over the old city walls. And the Jordanian army said, no, you can't march so close to the border, you'll have to, and they had to agree how to march Independence Day. Now, if I'd have gone and tapped somebody on the shoulder in that crowd during that march and said, you know something, in 3 weeks' time, Israeli flags will be flying over Jerusalem, we will control the entire city, and there won't be a single Jordanian flag or soldier or barricade anywhere here. He would have said, you are dreaming. And that is, as the good book says, we were like dreamers. And we saw the hand of God then. And we saw the hand of God just a few weeks ago, when all these 300 missiles were fired from Iran. I mean, statistically, it was impossible. Everybody has said it's impossible to endure 330 missiles, some ballistic, some this, some that. It's unbelievable. So we are looking for the same kinds of miracles that took place in 1967. And they truly, truly were. And why is Jerusalem important? Because that's been the center of the Jewish heart for thousands of years. And we should not even dream or think of giving it up for a Palestinian state or any other state. It's ours eternally. That's it.
Amen to that. Zalmi, thank you. And Roger, you have to share a little bit more about being one of those privileged people to be in Jerusalem the day after the Six-Day War. Just share with us what the mood was like in Jerusalem, what the mood was like in Israel when the Israelis were saying that Jerusalem, the old city, the site of the first and the second temple, are back in Jewish hands and under Israeli sovereignty. That must have been an incredible moment to actually witness that and actually see history in the making.
It was indeed a privilege, to be there amongst these celebrations, going into parts of this city which the Jews had not been allowed to go in for 19 years. But what was more interesting, to repeat myself, I said, to actually talk to the Arabs that lived in the city and who were very keen to embrace us in a way. Probably a strange word to use, but they did, there was no animosity. They talked to us, they put us up in their hotel, they fed us. So it was quite a spectacular occasion, excuse me, and it was really a privilege to have taken part in that celebration.
Excellent. And why is it so important, particularly now, Zalmi, after October the 7th, that not only the residents of Jerusalem, but the whole of Israel, together with the Jews in the diaspora, celebrate Yom Yerusalayim, or Jerusalem Day? It is
an identity issue. It is a something which unites both religious and the non-religious. Everybody understands that. The amount of secular Jews who observed, who went to a synagogue on Yom Kippur, or sat down at a Seder on Passover. This just after October the 7th was unbelievably high, because this is something that they really can identify with. And the majority of the butchery that went on October the 7th were in secular settlements, secular towns and villages in the southern border towns. All over the place you saw these posters for democratia and no judicial reform and all this. These were the people who were encouraging the Palestinians to come and work in their homes and so forth. These were the people who wanted a two-state solution. That's all changed now. That really has changed. They've really finally woken up. I've often said, I've met many people in Israel on the right and on the left. And I once told one of the cabinet ministers, I said, the difference between people on the right and the left is that the people on the left just don't believe in the concept of pure evil, that pure evil can exist. They believe that everybody can be like us. Yeah. And that's not right. And the cabinet minister says, let me remind you, I started off as a leftist and I'm now in the Likud on the right. But everybody has a wake up moment. Everyone has to, sometimes you need a lot of pain to wake up. And Israel's gone through all that pain, but maybe there is a silver lining that says, don't even think about giving up one more inch of the land. Because if we've seen one thing, clear as daylight, is every time we leave a vacuum, Iran turns it into a rocket base. And that's exactly what will happen with Gaza again, unless Hamas is completely smashed. And that is exactly what's going to happen in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, if there really is a Palestinian state. They will wipe Abbas away, swat him like a fly, and anyone who succeeds him, and they will turn that into a rocket base. And the people who fear that most of all, it's not Israel, it's Jordan.
Absolutely.
Because then Jordan would be completely sandwiched between Syria and the Palestinian state.
Which would be more likely to be Hamas run.
Of course.
And lock Jordan in with a Hamas-Palestinian state that would then undermine the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan as well. So let's have a look at last year's Yom Yerusalayim Day. Clearly better circumstances last year, and you can see the joy of the Israelis celebrating the unification of the eternal city that is Jerusalem.
Jerusalem Day is marked by flags and marches by thousands of Israelis throughout and around the Old City. Many say the heart and soul of the Jewish people is Jerusalem, and the heart of Jerusalem is the Temple Mount. during the 1967 Six-Day War, when Colonel Mate Gore said, "The Temple Mount is in our hands," it reverberated through the Jewish people around the world.
Jerusalem is where everything started. Everything started here for the Jewish people. This is where we became a nation. This is the capital of our nation, that all the tribes of Israel united around it. Jerusalem is mentioned so many times in our Bible, you know. And when people pray, they pray to Jerusalem. For us, it's really the focal point, really the place where every Jew feels that this is home.
Retired General Amir Avivi founded the Israel Defense and Security Forum, an organization dedicated to the protection of the Jewish state. A major step for that security, he believes, is more nations moving their embassies to Jerusalem, like the U.S. did in 2018. His group honored the nation of Kosovo for moving theirs more than a year ago.
It has been almost more than a year, I can say, that we established our diplomatic relations with Israel. And since that day, our relations went strength to strength.
Yet, while some nations have recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, other countries advocate for the so-called two-state solution. That proposal would divide Jerusalem and give the eastern half of the city, including the Temple Mount, to the Palestinian Authority.
You can't take a jewel and divide it. This is a jewel and needs to remain whole. I think that when people say we want to divide Jerusalem or we want to take the holy sites, they're not talking about a two-state solution. They are talking about destroying the soul of the Jewish people. And we will never, never let this happen.
Jerusalem's deputy mayor told CBN News the Jewish people have longed for the city for millennia.
To the Jewish people, is return to Zion is, we prayed for it for thousands of years. We were here physically, but we didn't have control of the city. And when we didn't have control of the city, we were barely allowed to worship freely. We were barely allowed to be here. And so to return as a free people, to rebuild the new city and the old city, to preserve the beauty of our heritage, and to bring worshippers from all around the world, pilgrims such as our Christian friends from all corners of the world here, so that they can pray also in the Christian sites. It's wonderful.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, that brings back so many memories of walking down towards the Western Wall, in Hebrew, the Hakatel Hamaravi, a very special place, Jerusalem. You really feel that connection with the God of Israel there, and an incredible city, and such incredible memories as well. Roger, as a Jewish person, what does Jerusalem mean to you?
Well, Jerusalem is mentioned in the Old Testament on many, many, many occasions, whereas it's never mentioned once in the Quran. So it absolutely means nothing in a way to Muslims. They have no connection with Jerusalem other than the fact that, they lived there between 48 and 67. But, Jerusalem is the heart of a Jew. We've every year, we pray that we will return to Jerusalem. Almost every Jew in the world will say that. And that's without even being there, a lot of them, and not knowing, but they'll say that because it is what is typical and important to every single Jew.
And Zalmi, I mean, you're very blessed because you've got a home in Jerusalem. So to actually live in Jerusalem and to live in London, and between the two must be kind of ideal. But for a religious Jewish person, share with us the spiritual, the biblical, historical and political connection between the eternal city, Jerusalem, and the Jewish people.
It's the direction to which we all pray. My first appointment every morning is with God. I go to the synagogue 7 days a week to do morning prayers, and I actually turn myself towards where the compass says Jerusalem. I'm very Jerusalem-centric. I really do feel and that I belong there, even when I'm out in the diaspora. When I'm there, I just revel in the sights and sounds and smells and everything that there is in Israel. Even the sound of the mufti calling to prayer in the old city of Jerusalem, because the only time that Jerusalem has been safe for all religions has been under Israeli control.
Absolutely.
You know, whether it's the Baha'is, whether it's whoever it happens to be, they are the only time that they are safe is there. And we know that Bethlehem, for example, has been under the control of the Palestinian Authority for decades now. And in that period, it has been systematically, ethnically cleansed of 80% of its Christians. Nobody talks about that, but that's not going to happen in Israel. We have no ethnic cleansing in Israel. 20% of Israel's population are Arabs. An Arab judge condemned Israel's president to prison for sexual impropriety. Okay? This is what happens. And they say this is an apartheid state. I'd really like to know the last time during the apartheid period that a black traffic warden gave a white driver as much as a parking ticket, let alone put him into jail. We know the truth. We are the people of the book. We have a divine mission to bring good to the world. And we are also considered, I think, the conscience of the world. And so when the world is in such a mess, they don't, you know, it's like kids running around mad, and there's no madder period than there is now. They don't like to have an adult in the room. We are the people of the book, and we are the adults in the room, and they resent us for that because we call out all of their hypocrisy. We call out all of their double standards. We call out all the things that you can see. 3 countries recognizing the state of Palestine as a reward for terror. That is morally repugnant.
Absolutely. And Roger, I mean, we know that there's a huge battle being waged for the control of Jerusalem. The Islamic world, together with the United Nations, refuse to kind of recognize that Jewish connection to Jerusalem. And it's amazing, isn't it, that if there's a UN vote that refuses to recognize the Jewish history and connection with your eternal city, Jerusalem, there's an incredible archaeological discovery that goes back to Bible times that again proves the existence of the Jewish people and the connection to the land and the eternal city, Jerusalem. Share with us your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, it just shows you that the United Nations is not a body that should be actually recognised anymore. It's way past its sell-by date, to be frank, and it's just not logical. Nothing they do is logical, and to try to dissociate Israel with Jerusalem or with Judea and Samaria as a whole is just ludicrous. And I can't believe that if you sat down and spoke face to face with some of these people in the UN that you couldn't actually ask them, are you serious about this? You know, you're just doing it because you're a body and you're all going to fall into line and hate Jews and you know and it's demonize Israel. It's not logical, you know, and I don't think we need to actually worry about it too much because we're not going to take any notice, quite frankly, of whatever they say, whatever they do, and all these bills they bring against Israel. They just should go in the wastepaper bin.
No, absolutely. So let's have a look. This is our last news report of the programme, and this is a very special one because this is Arik, who actually served in the IDF when the city of Jerusalem, the old city, was liberated in the Six-Day War back in June 1967.
Arik Akmon was the chief intelligence officer for the 55th Paratrooper Brigade during the Six-Day War.
I have exactly 10 hours to prepare a unit to war. Usually, to make our operation in Jerusalem, you need about 40 hours. It's a craziness. For an intelligence officer to El Arish, we have 3 weeks. Here, 10 hours.
As one of the soldiers who reunited Jerusalem, Akmon was honored at the Jerusalem premiere of the CBN docudrama In Our Hands, The Battle for Jerusalem. I talked with Akmon at his Tel Aviv home about the war and his life. When you entered the city for the first time in, a millennium, how did that feel to you? I mean, that was an absolute historic moment.
I was very busy. We was after 3 days of very, very hard fight. Basically, I do not think about history. I was thinking about doing our job. But I must tell you that when we, the two of us, and with us 10 comrades of the commanding unit of the brigade, came to the mount, that was the first time I feel that I have participated in something special. But to say the truth, I was very sad.
Why?
Because 95 of our comrades dead in this fight. The mixture of these two feelings is living in me until today.
And that was only the beginning of Achmon's contribution to Israel.
Arik Achmon, who was one of the first Israeli paratroopers into the Old City in 1967, and actually led the crossing of the Suez Canal in the Yom Kippur War of 1973.
Author Yossi Klein Halevi wrote about Achmon in his 6-day war book, Like Dreamers. He told me how Achmon played the role of hero more than once.
Now, you talk about the transformation of Israel from an agrarian society to a high-tech superpower. And Arik Achmon, the guy who led the crossing of the canal, starts off as a boy living on one of these radical socialist kibbutzim, little agrarian settlement. He leaves the kibbutz and ends up becoming the CEO of Israel's domestic airline. Israel's economy was socialist in those years. He fights the trade unions, and he creates the first privatized company in the state of Israel and opens the way to the high-tech free economy that we have today. So for me, Arik Achmon is a multiple hero.
While Achmon left the kibbutz at age 40, he never forgot what he learned there.
Until today, I think the kibbutzim built Israel.
Where did you get the vision to move beyond kibbutzim life into a broader economy and developing beyond just the socialist idea?
My values is still there in the kibbutz. I believe in free economy that mingled with a social responsibility. Money is very, very, very important things, but not all. It's values that more important than money.
If the economy hadn't changed to a free economy, do you think that Israel would have survived?
I think that the Israeli economy is a miracle. In such extreme circumstances, to be one of the leading economies in the world.
For Achmon, even with Israel's great development, he's troubled by divisions among his people. What about your enemies who don't think you have a right to exist?
The enemies is enemies. We're strong enough to look after ourselves. The enemy of Israel is in us, inside us, not outside.
The future for this country now. You were a man of vision. You've been a man of vision. What's your vision for Israel now?
I believe in the eternity of the Jewish people. We have to get over this conflict. I believe in it. I'm not sure that I will live until this day, but I believe in it. We will overcome.
Scott Ross for CBN News in Tel Aviv.
What an incredible, inspirational story there. Thanks to our friends at CBN. We're down to 3 minutes left of the programme. So Zalmi, what role can our Christian viewers do to stand with Israel, to stand with the Jewish people, but also to stand for a united Jerusalem under Israeli sovereignty?
I think a lot is being done in Congress. I've been hearing amazing speeches in Congress. Just this morning I was listening to Chip Roy, and we have Ted Cruz, and we have enormous, Nikki Haley, we have enormous support in the US Congress. That's where it's important. I don't even have any illusions of there being any support in the European Parliament or in the rest of Europe. You know, the soil of Europe is still soaked in Jewish blood. I don't think that's ever going to be erased, and we've clearly seen that it's now been completely overrun by Muslim immigration. And you have to look at Sweden, once the most liberal, enlightened country in the whole of Europe. It's now almost completely gone. It's subsumed. It's not a place that anyone wants to live in. So I think that is a lost cause. But in the United States, where it counts, hopefully we will see more and more Christians writing to their Congress people and encouraging them to pass the kinds of bills such as sanctioning the ICC and the ICJ. President of the ICJ is a Lebanese who's tweeted hatred for Israel many, many times. I think he tweeted unhappy birthday to Israel on one anniversary. That's the guy who heads up the International Court of Justice. And the ICC, the International Criminal Court, I call it the International Kangaroo Court, has absolutely no authority. But again, with sanctions and with activism, we can put them into what you called the dustbin.
Absolutely. And Roger, very briefly, what role do you think that Christians can play at this time? Because our Judeo-Christian friendship is the foundation of Western civilizations. You got 20 seconds.
Yeah, well, I mean, they do understand, I think they will understand that this is not just against the Jews. This is against Western values. It's against, it's against capitalism and democracy. And that's what the Christians are realizing, I think. And we've got to bring it more and more to their attention that what comes after the Jews is the Christians.
So Roger and Zalmi, thank you so much for being my special guests on the Middle East Report today. Zalmi, when you go to Israel next week, please send Jerusalem and Israel our love. I'd love to be there. And I want to thank you for watching this program at home. I think all of us can celebrate the fact that we've seen the re-establishment of the modern state of Israel. The reunification and liberation of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War was nothing less than an incredible miracle by God. So let's continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And thank you for watching the Middle East Report.